This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.
Welcome, Paul.
Oh, thank you. Michael Peters.
Indeed.
Long-time friend.
Nearly family member.
Nearly family. Dental technician.
Ceramist.
Ceramist. Close enough.
But whatever.
Real estate agent. Auctioneer.
Extraordinaire.
Business owner.
Yes. Business partner.
Business partner, yeah. Very good.
Husband. Father. Uncle. Son. I carry a lot of different titles.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, it depends at what stage of life you're asking, but when I was a kid, probably a professional surfer would have been something I would have liked.
Literally the furthest thing from my mind growing
Probably,
up.
but I mean, the reality was I was never good enough to even be an amateur surfer, quite frankly. But I would have liked to have been a professional surfer.
It's good to have aspirations. It's never too late, Michael.
Other than that, I didn't really have any goals.
Okay. So the dental ceramist, was that straight out of school?
Pretty much. I ended up, I didn't particularly like school. So for me, it was a matter of what sort of a trade can I get into? And I'm probably not your carpenter, bricklayer, plumber, electrician type of tradesperson. I like a more clean.
Because I've heard you tell Tess that you are multiple times.
Well, she just doesn't think I can fix stuff, but I can fix stuff. But I think that I went and did a day's, what do they call it, work experience with a dental technician, a dental ceramist, and I thought that's a pretty cool job. It sort of relied on a little bit of artistic ability because whilst you've got to make a tooth look like a tooth, you've got to be able to match colours and shape and shading and all that sort of stuff, and it was quite minute, very precise work. So it sort of appealed to me, and it was also just a way to get out of school. So it was either take an apprenticeship like that or continue at school, and wasn't really much of an option for me.
Well, I mean, that's similar to me. When I went on work experience when I was at school, my mum wanted me to be a journalist. She thought I should be a journalist. So when we did work experience, I had the closest thing to journalism was working in a printer's.
Yeah, right.
Letterheads and business cards. I'm not really sure what the connection is there. But so I did that. But then they offered me a job. So every school holiday I went back. And then as soon as I finished school, straight into work. I had 2 days off and then straight into work. All my friends had 6 weeks off and went to college. But I'm just like, fuck
Straight
that.
into it.
Straight into it. I hated school. So yeah, I can feel
relate.
Relate, yeah. So you did that until you were?
Well, I completed the 4-year apprenticeship that it was, and then I got the sack, and then basically I surfed for about...
Hold on. Why did you get the sack?
I don't know. I mean...
Come on.
I think what it was is the bloke that was training me through my apprenticeship, he was just a hard nut. He'd never had an apprentice finish an apprenticeship, and he'd had about 23. And I only found this out after I'd actually left my employment with him and started working in another dental laboratory. And his brother was actually a dental rep and came and had a chat with me. And he said, mate, do you realise you're the only bloke that's ever been able to go through and complete the apprenticeship? That's how hard he's been on apprentices. So he goes, good on you for making it all the way through. But he was a, can you say fuckwit on this show?
Feel free.
Fuckwit. If you're watching, you know who you are. And I think that, we just had a mutual dislike for each other. And he, at the end of my apprenticeship, which incidentally was Christmas time, he said to me, I've got some good news and some bad news. What do you want first? And I said, well, give me the good news. He goes, well, there's your holiday pay and your severance pay. And I said, what's the bad news? He goes, you don't have a job here next year when you come back. I said, I had no intention of coming back, mate, so there's no bad news. And I think then I basically, I really probably just surfed for the next 12 to 18 months and got to a point where I had holes in my jeans, and I was going out to a girlfriend's place for dinner, and my dad pulled me aside and said, where are you going dressed like that? Literally, I had holes in my jeans when you couldn't buy jeans with holes in them because they were trendy, they were threadbare. And he said to me, you can't go out with your girlfriend's parents for dinner and to a restaurant looking like that. He goes, it's about time you get a job. And it sort of made me go, yeah, maybe I better do that. So I got another job as a dental ceramist working with another guy who was a fantastic bloke to work for. And I think the things that I learnt from him was how to treat people and how to get the best out of people, because he was just a fantastic guy and I loved working there. But it got to the point where I'd realised that, being a dental ceramist was not for me. It was a little too insulated and there wasn't enough involvement with other people. So at that point, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I remember my mum saying to me, well, what do you want to do? Why don't you go back to university and do law? And hopefully no lawyers are watching, but I didn't have my dislike of the legal industry as I do now.
There's one lawyer that I know you like. And
I do like Chris. He's a great guy. No, there's quite a few lawyers that are good guys. I shouldn't say that. But it was not for me. In fact, I went and spent a day, or a couple of days, in fact, working with a family friend who was a lawyer, and just so much paperwork, and it was just not for me, and I really wasn't sure what to do. And my dad was a real estate agent, and Mum said, why don't you go and see what Dad does and have a hang out with him and see how you go. So I pretty much did that, and that was it. I pretty much got hooked on the whole basis of, goodness me, you can make a living sort of just talking to people and helping people, and so I loved it. So I sort of fell into real estate that way. So I probably fast-forwarded things for you a bit quicker, but yeah.
Cool. And then, so at that point you would have been what, 20?
I would have been about 20.
20, right.
19 to 20, I think, yeah. I would have finished my apprenticeship. I started at 15, so I would have finished at 19, and then I would have had about a year and a half off. So I would have been about 20 and a half, something like that. Right. And I got my first job in real estate, and I was employed just to chase up blocks of land and sell blocks of land, and a lot of new homes were being built in the area that I was employed in, so I was sort of dealing with a lot of the builders and all that sort of stuff, and I loved it. I loved the freedom of it, and I thrived, so I've sort of never looked back, quite frankly.
Okay. It's interesting what you were saying about learning from that guy, because I learned, so when I worked at the printers, there was two owners, Mick and John. Mick was like really the boss. And I learned a lot from him about how to treat people, but in a different way than you did, because he was more like the first guy you worked for, an absolute tosser.
Yeah.
And you walk into work 3 minutes late, and he'd be having a crack at you.
It was the same as this
for
bloke.
an hour at the end of the day. No thanks
Yeah.
for that, And obviously, people that work in our office now, like Justin, for example, like that kid, when he's doing. He's there till 7:30, 8 o'clock some nights. So you have to tell him to go home.
Yeah. Well, he's sometimes he'll do. He's done emails at sort of like 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and it's like, mate, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Go to bed.
Yeah, but if he needs time off in the morning, then
that's the beauty of it, isn't it? I mean, and that's what I've always loved about real estate, is you've got that real flexibility and freedom to come and go as you like, and move as you need to, and you can deal with your family, and it's labour intensive, of course, because it's you're sort of doing a lot of business when people are home after work. Yeah. But it also gives you that flexibility and the freedom.
It's perfect for me. I mean, being able to as you know, like be around for the girls and take them to school and pick them up and everything. Yeah. It's been amazing for me. So you get into real estate when you're 20. When did you? Because I remember, I got into real estate when I was 40. And you kind of I felt like I was just someone, doing real estate for a while. And then I can't remember when it was. There was one day where I think it might have been the first time I did like 2 deals in a week or something like that. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm a real estate agent,
Yeah, I can do this.
That realization. So for you, when was that like?
I don't know. Like for me, it was sort of every month I'd reflect back on the production or the number of sales or the number of listings or the number of clients I'd been able to serve, and I'd sort of think to myself, God, it was lucky, if I didn't happen to know those people or bump into these people. And so every month, as each month sort of progressed, when I first started, I just always used to go, gee, that was a lucky month. And that was a lucky month. And then probably by about month 11, I started sort of, and in fact, I remember having a talk with the bloke that I first worked for, who ended up becoming a business partner of mine. We ended up going into business together, and he said, mate, that's not luck. He goes, you might have 1 month that might be a lucky month. You could have 2 or 3 months that are a lucky month, but to have nearly 11 consecutive months, it's not luck. It's actually you're working, number one. And I think with any enterprise that you're involved in, I think if you're not prepared to give it absolutely everything you've got, I just don't think you have success. So I threw myself into it, much like you have, and you continue to do. And as
well, I was
both
just thinking
do.
when you said that, like for me, like I have the 35 sales in one street, and some people that we know think that's luck.
35? Aren't you up to like 39 now?
No, it's 35. 30 at the time of recording, 35.
Oh, I thought you were up around 37. I've been telling people 37, so I better. Maybe
then-
that's
then-
37 plus 35 plus GST.
That's right. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there is luck. Yeah, there is sometimes luck. But yeah,
You make your own. The harder you work,
the luckier I get.
the more luck you make, or something like that.
Right. Okay.
So probably, I'd say probably, by the end of that first year, I sort of came to the conclusion that this job really fits me, and I love it, and I'm passionate about it, and I sort of never got into it to make money, ironically, and yet everybody who looks at you from outside of real estate probably thinks that you're just driven
That's
by
what you're looking
cash.
for,
Yeah, and it's not. It's absolutely, and never has been. I've never really ever made a sale, and even to this day, if I'm calling an auction, for example, I generally, I'm not even thinking about money. I'm thinking about the client's money, the vendor's money, or the seller's money, but I'm really focused on just doing the absolute best that I possibly can for the person that I'm representing. And I think that, I remember my dad, who was a real estate agent, and hence the reason why I got into real estate. He used to just simply make it a very simple thing. He said, there's two things you need to do. You need to do your very best for the people you're working for, and you need to be 100% honest 100% of the time. He said, so there should never be a need for you to lie or mislead somebody, and there should never be a need for you to be anything other than transparent and honest. And I think that, I probably, well, as we've got our kids now have started the business in Melbourne, and that would probably be the same advice I've given them both the same advice, and I think it's pretty good advice to go. But probably, again, in any business, I would imagine, unless you're in a business where bullshitting gets paid.
Yeah. Okay, so 2021, you're a real estate agent. You feel like you're a real estate agent, and you said you went into business with the
bloke that employed me.
Yeah. So when did that kind of all come about?
So I basically got into it, and I sort of just worked, my ring off really, and I worked really, really hard, and again, because when you're doing something you really love, it's that saying, I don't even know how it goes. If you find a job and if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life or something.
Exactly,
And it's definitely the case. I mean, I don't, even today, I don't really feel like when I come to work that it's work, so it's a nice way to make a living, that's for sure. But I think by the time I got to, after that first 12 months and then maybe another 18 months in, the business had really started to thrive that I was working within, and there was talk of opening up another branch office, or in fact a much bigger office. And so there was a need for a branch manager in the office that I was working in, and by then I was sort of generally doing a lot more business than anyone else in the business, and so I sort of had learnt a lot and had done quite well, and the guy that owned the business said he's advertising for a branch manager, and I thought, well, why can't I be the bloody branch manager, And I remember, I don't remember who I was talking to, maybe my old mate Brucey, and he said, why don't you apply for that job yourself? And I said, I'm probably too young. And he goes, hey, what's to do? You may as well apply. He goes, you know what to do, and everybody respects you and all that sort of stuff. So I in fact, I applied for that job as the branch manager and was lucky enough to get that. And so I guess at probably 21, I was managing that office and was the sort of licensed, branch manager of that business. And I think by then I'd become an auctioneer as well. So I was sort of pretty much at that point, by about 21 and a half, running that business and had a team that I was working with. And I think my previous working as a dental technician was a huge advantage for me, because I worked with two different personality types, one that got the absolute worst out of me and that treated me like a piece of shit, and the other guy that was just an incredibly supportive, mentoring type of person. And I was made to feel like what I was doing was valued and was good and worthwhile, whereas the previous fella that I worked for did the exact opposite. So I sort of had the two contrasts. And so when I was sort of managing that office, when I first started, and as young as I was, I really applied the things that I knew worked for me and the way I was treated, and I wanted to treat people in the same way. So, yeah, so by about 21 and a half, I was managing that business, and then I became an auctioneer, and I wanted to become, like if I do stuff, I generally try to be the best I can be. It doesn't mean I'm better than others, but I want to really put myself in the game and be the best that I can be and be satisfied that I'm the best I can be.
Yeah.
And I think when you're that way and you're competitive with yourself that way, you tend not to ever really be satisfied with whatever level you get to. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about in lots of different areas of your life with DJing and real estate and the gyms and everything, and fitness and health. If you're driving and you're striving, then you tend to find yourself never really satisfied with whatever level you get to. So, I threw myself into every aspect of the business and loved every aspect of it. And to this day, the things that I loved back then, I still love, doing the auctions, and, it's just a good way to make money, make a living.
So that's your early 20s. By the time you get to in your 30s, where's...
Yep, so in my 30s, so let me just think about this. So there'd been a little bit of so what had happened was I was running this office in for a chap that became my business partner. But prior to that happening, I took off and I went and had a holiday in Hawaii with a mate of mine. And when I came back, one of the guys that worked with me that I was very close to and was good mates with, he was considerably older than me. And it's the nature of real estate that you'd be working with very young people, middle-aged people, and you can be working with very old people. So, and, as you become friendly with people at this level, sort of age becomes quite insignificant. You don't really notice it. So, you can have a friend that's 65 and you can be 20, but you tend to get along like normal friends.
Now. I mean, what are you now, 50? Late 50s. I'm mid-40s. Justin's 22.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of a real estate office, is that you really do have a great mix. I think, we had a lady working for us 4 years ago that was 84 or 85. Margaret. Yeah, Margaret. So, and that's the beauty of real estate, is that there's no age restriction on it. I mean, Justin started off as your PA and
19, yeah,
and he's now heading up together with a couple of the others the property management department. So there is no really age restriction. But in any event, I'd gone over to Hawaii and spent a bit of time over in Hawaii for a holiday. I think we were there for 2 weeks. And when I got back, George, who was the fellow that I worked with, it was a Dutch guy, and he was the sort of bloke that when I first started there, he never said boo to me. I'd pop my head in his office every single day on the way to work, on the way through to my office, and morning, George, and he'd just sort of look over his newspaper at me and put his head back down in his newspaper. He's an old Dutchman, and he had very little to say. And I found out later on that he didn't talk to anybody that was new in the business, because real estate has such a high attrition rate. It's a bit of a revolving door. His attitude was, well, this young kid might be here today and gone tomorrow. I'm not going to waste my time talking to him. And I remember telling my dad about this bloke, George, this old Dutch guy, and he was just not engaging at all with me or saying, and Dad just said, just keep saying good morning. Eventually he'll say good day back to you. And so I did that. Every morning I went in, g'day, George. He'd ignore me. I'd walk off, wouldn't stop me. The next morning I'd pop my head in, g'day, George. And then I remember once we were in a sales meeting and we'd had a lean month in terms of sales, and George, who never spoke to me, never acknowledged me, never said anything, in the meeting he said, well, I think we need to give Michael a bit of a round of applause, because if it wasn't for his production, the office would have gone down the shit chute this month, because none of us have done any sales except Michael. So well done, mate, and gave me a clap. And I'm sitting there going, what? This bloke's never spoken to me and he's done that. And pretty much from then on, we developed a really good friendship. And he's an extremely intelligent man, and he had a heap of wisdom, and I learned a lot from him, and I had a lot of respect for him. And in a way, he played very much a mentoring role for me when I was quite young. And I think even today, some of the things that he would talk to me about, they still sort of float around in my head and resonate with me now. Coming back from Hawaii, I go to a sales meeting, and we had a huge big boardroom, and we probably had about 30 or 40 salespeople working for us at this time. And everybody was quite somber. Sales meetings are normally a time where all the salespeople are laughing and mucking about, and it's usually a time that you all get together, and there's a bit of one-upmanship all the time, with typically as salespeople are. And And I remember it was just long faces and everybody was really quiet. And I'm like, what's going on? And then the chap that became my business partner, my boss at the time, pulled me aside and he said, mate, come into my office. He goes, I want to have a chat with you. So I go into the office and he says to me, look, we've got some really bad news. Last night, George had a major heart attack and has sadly passed away. And that just literally rocked my world. And I don't know why. Maybe, when you have someone, the first person that's really quite close to you that you feel is your contemporary. I mean, he was considerably older than me, not a lot old. I mean, when I say not a lot older, he's only probably a 58 or a 62-year-old man, so relatively young, But
too young to die.
Yeah, a lot older than me, but way too young to die. And so when he passed away, I just remember just thinking, shit, if I don't do exactly what I want to do, and if I don't do it now, that could happen to me at some point, So I went into the sales meeting, and the whole time I'm sitting there, because I've just come back from Hawaii, and I'm thinking, I really just want to surf. Like I've been working my guts off, and I'm making a lot of money, but money's never been my master. It's not been the reason why I work. I like the things that money brings, but it's not something that I'm prepared to give up on everything to get. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this, and it just really shocked me so much that pretty much straight after the sales meeting, I went and his nickname was the Fat Man. So he'll know if he ever watches this that I'm talking about him. But I went into the Fat Man's office and I said, mate, I think I'm resigning, mate. And he goes, what are you talking about? You're doing a great job. You're looking after the team up at the other office. You're managing that. He goes, you've got to be one of the youngest managers, most success. I said, mate, he goes, what are you going to do? Are you going to go work somewhere else? And I said, no, I'm going to go live in Queensland and I'm going to just live at the beach and I just want to surf. And, I think most people were pretty shocked. My parents were sort of pretty cool about it, actually. Like, yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? So anyway, I packed up and I moved up here with a mate of mine, and went and bought a combi van and decked it all out and drove it up here, and fantastic memories. Driving from Melbourne up here and stopping all the way along and surfing all the way up, and if we got somewhere that we liked, we'd stay there a little bit longer, and then finally got up here, and we just surfed and had a bit of fun, and then eventually I went back to Melbourne because my mum was diagnosed with leukemia, and she rang to tell me that I've got leukemia and. So I'm going to be okay. The doctors think that they've get a handle on it, and I sort of knew enough about the world to know that when you get leukemia, it cannot be a good ending potentially. And anyway, so I decided, she's not going to necessarily be around forever, and I don't want to spend my life completely away from my family. So I packed up and went back to Melbourne. And it was then that I got back in touch with, what happened was I had a bloke that wanted to back me into an office, and I wanted to open up an office in a suburb down in Melbourne called Ivanhoe, which is sort of a leafy inner city, or northeastern inner city type of a suburb. And I ended up, this particular guy wanted to put up the money and become sort of like a silent shareholder in the business. And somehow the Fat Man, the guy that I used to work with, he found out that's what I was planning on doing. He said, mate, come and have lunch with me. He goes, I've heard you want to set up an office in Ivanhoe. He goes, I want to open up an office in Ivanhoe. Why don't we do it together? And I said, yeah. I said, the only thing is, mate, I've got no money. I've just been surfing for ages up there, so I'm broke, and this bloke was going to put the money up. And he said, well, you're going to be forever, what's the word? When somebody beholden to him. And so I said, yeah, you're probably right. He goes, mate, come and work with me. You know that you're going to make good money. And he goes, we'll go dollar for dollar. Whatever you put in, I'll put in. And when we got enough in the kitty, we'll open the office. And we did that. And so 18 months later, we opened up the office, and I officially became, a partner in that business. And we ran it for a fair period of time. And we had a great deal of success. And we had a good partnership. We never had arguments or need to have arguments and fights or anything of that nature. We had a very successful sort of a business and continued to grow it. And we opened up additional offices, which was really good. And then I think he ended up wanting to exit the business, and so we had an opportunity to sell everything lock, stock and barrel to a company that was it was about the second publicly listed company that was trying to sort of break into the real estate world. I mean, you've got companies now like McGrath, for example, that are listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and there's I think there might be, or there was one other that I used to work with, which was Run, but generally it's been an industry that's very boutique. So you haven't really had a lot of the corporates come in, but they've tried, and Collings was one organisation that was a publicly listed company that tried to open up a whole bunch of real estate offices, particularly in Victoria, but also nationally was a goal. Run Run Property was another one that did the same thing. And the company that we sold to was, again, another real estate business that was a floated, publicly listed company. And so we sold to them. And then I'm like, well, okay, what am I going to do now? And I was too young to retire. I had a few other interests, and I went through a divorce, and pretty much at exactly the same time. So it was sort of like the perfect storm hitting at that point. And so, you default back to what you know, which was real estate. And so we had a crack at opening up an office in Northcote, which we did. And we built that up and then sold it again, sold that business. And I worked for a bloke who I knew in Melbourne, who was a bit of an old, is it a stalwart? Is that the word?
Stalwart, yeah.
Yeah, of real estate in Melbourne. He was a president of the REIQ for a period of time, and just a very well-known...
REIV, surely.
Sorry, REIV. Yeah, that's what happens when you're sort of floating between two states.
Offices, yeah.
And he's a great guy to work with, and in fact, I still have contact with him today. When we've recently, as you know, we've recently opened up our office in Melbourne, and having never purchased a real estate business before, I've always built them up as we have in our business, you and I, and. You've never bought a real estate business. I've never bought a real estate business or rent roll. So I didn't know really what to do. So I thought, well, who am I going to talk to about this? And it was, the guy, Phil, that I used to work with, that was good enough to spend, plenty of time with me, helping me through it and giving us some guidance through that. So he was a huge help and put me in touch with the right lawyers to help us, finalise that sale. And, of course, then we've acquired that business in Melbourne, which is a great addition to, our brand and where we're headed, and it gives us that sort of synergy between sort of Melbourne and Victoria, sure, and southeast Queensland, where there seems to be a fair bit of traffic between these two areas. So that's been a good thing. And as you know, Jake and Kurt, our kids, are running that business, and it's nice to think that our business can become intergenerational, and your daughters may be part of it.
Yeah, for sure. So you're working for the office in Melbourne, and then at that point, that's where you then came back to Queensland, which would have been 2017.
Yeah, well, I made a few trial runs up here. I came up without Tess and on my own, and spent 6 months up here, literally working with a mate of mine up here in his real estate office with the intention of going into partnership with him. And as it turned out, we just had a different way of doing business, and that wasn't to be. And literally going to open up another office here. And I was actually going to look at a commercial premises to potentially put a lease on it and open a business up here. And I got a call from Phil, who was the bloke I'd worked for previously in Melbourne. And he said, mate, why don't you come back? He said, he goes, what are you doing up there? And I said, well, funnily enough, I'm literally going to look at a property today and maybe put a tenancy agreement in place to lease at a commercial place and open my own office. He goes, mate, come back and work with me. And it was a little persuasive, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll go back down, and because I didn't dislike working there, it was good, and so I ended up going back down there and started working again, and had a really great team of people there that I worked with, and I've always loved the environment of a real estate office. It's a lot of fun. So, and that was quite a big office, and multiple offices, but a very big rent roll as well, and then. And from memory, I think I quit again to come up here again. So I think I'd been backwards and forwards within his office for sort of 2 or 3 times. Right. But again, whenever I leave on good terms. Yeah. And, I did leave his business to go and work in another business in Melbourne called Run, which was one of the publicly listed companies, and we were in charge of, we were the directors of sales. And I said to Phil, the bloke that I worked with, I said, mate, I'm not going to, obviously, having owned real estate businesses, I, give you my word, I'm not going to take business from you or do anything that, is not right. And he knew that was how I would be, and so I didn't. And I think when you leave on those terms, as he said to me, mate, he goes, listen, the door's always open for you. And fortunately for me and for him, that door was left open, and I was able to walk back into it 2 or 3 times, which was I was grateful for, to be able to have that opportunity. But I think it also worked well for Phil and his business. And then finally we made the decision that we're moving up, and we'd purchased a property up here as an investment, and we decided to move into that. And we were looking at, potentially buying something bigger to move into, but we got to know all the people in the building where we were living, and we're still there. So we haven't moved, and we're not likely to. So again, we like the people and we like the location, so it sort of serves us well.
So Black and White launches in August 2017.
Yep, August 2017. We opened the doors. And at that point, we were just operating from home. I really didn't want to go down the path of opening up another business. I'd sort of done a lot of that, and the idea was we were going to sort of create a bit of a home-based business and a small brand, and so we launched this business, and we got the graphic designers in place and bought ourselves a little templated website and did all the basics that you'd need to be able to run a real estate business. We had to learn the sort of nuances that relate specifically to Queensland property as opposed to, say, Victorian. And it's not greatly different, but it's a little different. And so we started running a business, and we had a couple of other people working for us that we knew at the time, and we worked from home. And I think I either overestimated my abilities or underestimated the difficulties in breaking into a new market. Of course, when we set up here, we didn't have any contacts. I didn't know people up here that were I could rely upon. I didn't have a whole history of people in Melbourne. It was very easy for me. I'd go and do an auction, and after the auction, I'd have 3 or 4 people come up to me and say, Michael, we'd like you to do the auction. Yeah. And so they would list their property. So, getting business was very easy because you had, I guess, that momentum and the following of people that were going out watching it. And particularly Melbourne, it's a very auction-orientated market. And people would select their agency based on the auctioneer that was performing within that agency. And so I was very lucky to be good enough to have people want to use me, and that helped me get listings. But when I came up here, of course, I was a nobody. I didn't have auctions. I didn't have any properties on my website. And it was a lot tougher than I thought, and it really took every ounce of everything I had. And I guess the more difficult something becomes, the more I dig in and say, I'm not going to fail. There's no room for failure. And so we pushed on, and then we eventually got there. And I think maybe 18 months later, 12 months later, you joined us. Would that be fair to say?
No, it was less than that. It was...
I don't even recall when it was. It felt like maybe a year later, was it?
Well, within the first year.
Actually, it was the first year because we had Berrigan Street that we auctioned, and you were at that auction, weren't you? I don't think you were working. I think you came with a girlfriend you were going out with at the time.
She who shall not be mentioned.
Is that like Voldemort?
Just don't say her name 3 times. She'll jump out of a mirror. So I met you. The first time we ever spoke was at her birthday, the day that you moved up.
July 19th.
20th. Close enough. But we didn't even really speak. I think we just said hello, and that was it. You were on the other side. I remember you sitting on the other side of the room, and then obviously we started having, because of
catch-ups, the dynamic between family members.
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
And then, you obviously saw some potential in me.
Yeah, well, I mean, we clicked pretty much, I think.
Straight away, yeah.
We became good mates really quickly, and it's always... I mean, I've always considered the people that I work with to be mates of mine, and it can be quite disturbing when those friends do things that let you down. But generally speaking, if you like the people that you're working with, then it makes work a nice place to go to.
Well, I mean, that whole thing of if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life. And if you're working with people you see as friends, it's not really like you're at work.
It's sort of social and it's fun, a lot of mucking around, a lot of banter. So, yeah, I think when we met, we got on really well. And I think you were having some challenges with the work and the gyms that you were, because your hours were at the other end of each day. Sort of thing.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'd been running that for years on that basis, and it was fine. It was just the when I met
Voldemort.
She who shall not be named. She just started a 3-month long service leave, so I kind of went into 3-month holiday mode with her. Yeah. Just at the point where my manager in the UK was having a nervous breakdown, which I didn't realise, and then by the time I got back into work, like in the gym space, it can take years to build up. I remember my accountant, he was like, we do VAT, like GST, just twice as expensive. But every 3 months you do a VAT return. So it gives you a bit of a temperature gauge as to how your business is traveling, like every 3 months. And I remember for 2.5 years, every quarter is like best quarter you've ever had, best quarter you've ever had. And it was just building. And we'd have little blips here and there, but it was just building and building and building. And, I had visions of adding, I had two sites in Sheffield, and we were looking to expand. But then, literally within 3 months, as I took my eye off the ball, and then Annalise, bless her grandma had died, and she'd not dealt with that, and she was things were slipping, but she was hiding it because she wanted to try and fix it before I realised, and things were just getting worse. And then as I got back into work mode, I just remember one day I said to her, we've got to pay such, and she said, well, we can't afford it. I'm like, what do you mean we can't afford it? Oh, we've lost a few members. And I'm like, well, we need to know, and then she did this report, and almost half the membership had gone in 3 months. Things had happened, another gym had opened, and some of the members had gone to try that, and then said, oh yeah, come and try, because people used to come to my gym who'd never met before. They made friends at the gym, but then one of them would go and try another gym and then invite all the friends that they met to go with them. And then all of a sudden you've got groups of 20 people going, and then,
it's like a virus.
Yeah. So that happened. And then you'd been saying to me, you should really give real estate a crack. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about real estate. Because I just thought...
It's to do with houses.
Yeah, and also I honestly thought in real estate, if you drove down the street and someone said, what's that house worth, that you'd somehow... No, yeah. And then obviously as time goes by, you realise that, you could just research the comparable sales, the market's always shifting, but I didn't know about any of that. But through, associating with you and Tess, I kind of got a glimpse into, well, this is not about houses, it's about the people. And I thought, well, I can deal with people. I remember one time a guy saying to me he said, oh, real estate, you must be really difficult keeping people happy. And I'm like, you're joking. I said, if I'm dealing with a client, it's 3-4 months if things go really badly that you're having to focus on that client and keep them happy. I said, I've had members at the gym that I had for 10 years paying a premium to do shit they don't want to do, and I'm telling them not to do the stuff they want to do, and I've had them for 10 years. Try keeping those people happy.
Yeah.
This is easy.
Yeah.
But so it was obviously you being around you, and then the gyms getting to a point where there was, the only thing I could see to sort of resolve it was to go back to England for a minimum of 6 months and try and, because Annalise left. Her husband called me, he's like, she's not coming
out.
back.
Yeah.
So, but then Danny, who's the head trainer, who still runs the gyms now, he offered to buy me out, and that sort of, and I'm like, okay, well, let's get this real estate.
Now's your time.
So I bought some suits and did the course, and
never looked back.
Never looked back.
Never looked back.
So obviously you set Black and White up. I joined, and then 7 years later, what is it now?
We're coming up to 8.
8, coming up to 8 years, yeah.
Yeah.
8 years, and now we've got the office in Victoria.
Yep.
Pretty successful, really.
It's been a good run, yeah. And by no means is it anything to do specifically with me. As you've spoken about Tess, my wife, that plays a huge part in somebody's
main
success.
Driver, let's face it.
Well, did you say she's the slave driver? Yeah, I'd agree with that. But she's an important part of our business, as you know, and also an important part of our family and an important part of your family. I mean, there's been times where, Sunday morning you've had to race off and do deals back in the day, and you'd be dropping 2 little girls off to be babysat with Tess and I, and we feel pseudo uncle, auntie /
well, I mean, you're the closest thing to
almost, you know what I mean?
That my girls have got on my side of the family.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. So I think it's been a really good run, and hopefully it continues, and we continue to have the same success and the same fun,
or even more.
You have challenges, as you know. We've had some recent challenges that have been somewhat disappointing, but I think in the entire time that I've been in this business, there are challenges and disappointments and things that make you sad and things that hurt you. And I think at the end of the day, it's the ability to sort of, push on regardless, and not to try to hold on to too much negativity, and be able to sort of see there's always going to be a bigger, brighter light that you can continue to chase. And I think that's where we're sort of headed.
Certainly, my friend, certainly. Well, legend. We'll be back at this table soon.
Yeah.
And
It's been good.
thanks for your time, mate.
Thank you for having me.
No worries.
This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.